You wake up, and before you even open your eyes, there's already something pulling at you. Maybe it's a conversation from yesterday that you replayed too many times before falling asleep. Maybe it's something coming up today that you don't feel ready for. Or maybe it's nothing specific, just that low hum of pressure that seems to follow you everywhere now. You get up, make coffee, check your phone, and within 10 minutes your mood has already been shaped by someone else's words, someone else's news, someone else's problem. And the day hasn't even started. Here's what's strange about this. You are a capable person. You handle things. You show up. You put in the effort. But somewhere inside, there's a part of you that feels like you're always slightly behind, always reacting, always catching up to something. And no matter how much you get done, that feeling doesn't really go away. Most people assume this is just modern life. The pace, the noise, the constant notifications, it all adds up. And if you could just slow things down a little, you'd feel more in control. But what if the speed isn't actually the problem? What if the real issue is something much quieter, something happening inside you long before anything outside of you even moves?
There's a pattern worth paying attention to. The people who seem most calm, most grounded, most focused, they're not living simpler lives. They're not avoiding difficulty. Many of them are dealing with just as much pressure as anyone else, sometimes more. But there's something different about how they move through it. Like the noise doesn't get all the way in. And for a long time, most people look at that quality and assume it's just personality. Some people are built that way. They're wired differently. They handle stress better. It's just who they are. But that's not true. And the reason I know that is because of a book written by a man who had every reason in the world to fall apart and quietly chose not to. His name was Marcus Aurelius. He was the most powerful man in the Roman Empire at the time. Emperor, military commander, one of the most influential figures in the ancient world. And he was writing in his private journal, not for anyone to read, not to build a legacy, just trying to remind himself every single day how to be a decent human being under impossible pressure. That journal became one of the most widely read books in history. It's called Meditations. And what makes it different from almost anything else is this. It wasn't written for you. It wasn't written for any audience. It was a man talking to himself, trying not to lose himself. And somehow, reading it feels more personal than almost anything written directly for you. Because the problems he was wrestling with aren't Roman problems. They're your problems. The same spiraling thoughts, the same frustration with people who don't understand you, the same question of how to stay grounded when everything around you is loud and unpredictable. This isn't a book about Stoicism as an intellectual exercise. It's a manual someone wrote for themselves on how to survive, not the world, but their own mind. And it starts with an idea that sounds simple, but takes years to actually feel. Think about how much energy you spend on things that aren't yours to control. Your boss changes the plan last minute, and now your whole week is off. Someone says something about you that isn't true, and you spend the next 3 days thinking about it. Traffic makes you late, and you arrive irritated before you've even started. A project you worked hard on gets ignored, and you can't let go of the unfairness of it. None of this is unusual. This is Tuesday for most people. But here's what Marcus came back to, over and over again in his journal. He kept drawing a line, not between what is easy and what is hard, not between what is good luck and bad luck. He drew a line between what is yours and what is not yours. And by yours, he didn't mean your stuff, your time, your relationships. He meant something more specific than that. He meant the one thing no situation, no person, no amount of pressure can actually reach. Your own judgment, your own response, the decision you make about what a thing means and what you do next. Everything outside of that line,
Other people's decisions, other people's moods, outcomes you don't control, how things turn out despite your best effort. He considered it completely separate from him. Not his business, not his problem in the deepest sense. This isn't resignation. It isn't giving up on things that matter. It's something sharper than that. It's recognizing that when you pour your energy into the things you can't control, you're not actually solving anything. You're just depleting yourself. You wake up tired, not because life is hard, but because you've been spending all night trying to control a conversation that's already over. Most people don't notice this. They assume that caring about something means thinking about it constantly, that the more you worry about an outcome, the more seriously you take it. But Marcus would say you have it backwards. The most serious thing you can do is put all your focus on your own choices, how you prepare, how you respond, what you decide, and then release everything else without resentment. Because what you can't control was never yours to begin with. And once you understand that, something strange happens. You start to feel lighter. Not because your problems got smaller, but because your mind stopped fighting wars it can't win.
Here's something worth sitting with. How often is your mood on any given day determined by something someone else did? Someone is cold to you in the morning and your whole day shifts. Someone doesn't respond the way you expected, and now you're reading into it. Someone voices a criticism, and you spend the rest of the week quietly defending yourself in your own head. We absorb other people's behavior like it says something about us, like their mood is feedback, like their opinion is data about our worth. Marcus kept coming back to this. He was surrounded by people who disappointed him, frustrated him, acted small when the moment called for something larger. He was emperor. He had more to be irritated about than almost anyone. And yet he wrote to himself again and again, "Don't be surprised when people act according to their nature. Don't expect a fig tree to produce anything other than figs." That sounds cold on the surface, but what he was actually doing was protecting something. He was refusing to let someone else's limitations become his emotional reality. Think about the last time you were genuinely thrown off by another person. Really ask yourself, what did you believe their behavior was saying? That you weren't enough? That you should have known better? That you couldn't trust your own read on things? Most of the time, what other people do has almost nothing to do with you. They are moving through their own story, their own pressures, their own unresolved patterns. But because we are always the main character of our own experience, we assume we are the main character of theirs too. And so we carry their weather like it belongs to us. Marcus didn't do that. Not perfectly, he was human, but he kept practicing. He kept reminding himself that he was not responsible for what others chose to do, only for how he chose to respond, only for whether he stayed himself or became a reaction to them. This is where things start to change for most people who read this book carefully, because you realize that a huge portion of your mental energy is spent processing what other people think and feel and do, most of which you cannot change and none of which you chose. And when you stop trying to manage all of that, you suddenly have more of yourself available for the things that actually need you.
There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from doing too much, but from constantly preparing for things that haven't happened yet. You lie awake at night working through a conversation you haven't had. You spend your lunch break worrying about a meeting that's 3 weeks away. You enjoy a good moment, but underneath it, there's already something pulling at you. A deadline, a concern, a version of the future you're trying to prevent. Marcus wrote about this directly. He kept returning to a deceptively simple instruction: stay here. Not in the philosophical sense, not some vague mindfulness cliche, but in the practical sense. Right now, in this room, with this task, this is where you actually exist. The future is a place your mind visits, but where no real work gets done. He noticed something about himself and about the people around him, that most suffering is not happening in the present tense. It's happening in anticipation of something that may never come, or in rehearsal for conversations that may go differently than you fear. And the strange part is that this kind of mental travel feels responsible. It feels like preparation. It feels like you're taking your life seriously. But what it often produces is a kind of numbness to what's actually in front of you. I've seen this happen to people who were genuinely successful by any measure, good income, healthy family, stable life, and still unable to be present for any of it, because they're always already in the next problem, the next risk, the next thing that needs to be managed. Marcus's answer wasn't to stop thinking about the future. It was to notice when your mind had traveled forward and come back. Not with judgment, not with frustration at yourself, just the quiet discipline of return. And if you practice that small movement often enough, what starts to happen is that today feels different. Not perfect, not easy, just real. And something that's real can be worked with. Something you're imagining usually can't.
At some point, Marcus asks himself a question that's worth stopping on. He asks, what do you actually have to lose? Not your income, not your reputation, not other people's respect. He goes deeper than that. What is the thing that if someone took it from you, you would truly be diminished? His answer was this: nothing outside of your own character. Income can go. It has for people who had much more than you. Reputation can be destroyed overnight. He watched it happen to people he admired. Relationships end. Health changes. Plans fall apart. None of that is yours to hold permanently. But the way you treat people when things are hard, the honesty you keep when it would be easier to lie, the effort you bring to something when no one is watching, that's yours. And no external event can take it from you unless you give it up yourself. This sounds like idealism, but read it again, and it's actually the most practical thing he wrote. Because what most people are doing when they compromise their values under pressure is trading the one thing they actually own for things they don't. They cut a corner to protect their reputation and lose both. They bend the truth to protect a relationship and lose themselves. They perform a version of themselves they don't believe in, hoping it will secure something that can never really be secured from the outside. Marcus kept coming back to virtue not as an abstract principle, but as a survival strategy, as the one foundation that holds when everything else is shifting. And when you look at the people in your life who have aged well, not just in health, but in the way they carry themselves, the way they seem at peace, you usually find someone who made that same quiet choice again and again, to stay themselves, even when it cost them something. That's not an achievement, it's a practice. And it's available today. There's a line in Meditations that most people read too quickly. Marcus writes to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What most people miss is the instruction he gives himself right before that. He says, begin the morning by telling yourself, today I will meet people who are ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, jealous. And this will be okay, because they cannot hurt me unless I let them, and I will not let them. He's not trying to pump himself up. He's not doing affirmations. He's doing something much more useful. He's preparing. He's acknowledging that the world is going to be difficult today. Not maybe, not perhaps, but certainly. And he's deciding in advance what that means to him. This is different from pessimism. He's not dreading the day. He's equipping himself for it, so that when it comes, he doesn't have to figure out his values under fire. He's already decided. Most people do the opposite. They start each day hoping it will be easy, hoping people will be reasonable, hoping nothing unexpected will knock them off course. And when it doesn't, when the world shows up, as it usually does, complicated and imperfect and demanding, they're caught off guard every single time. Marcus practiced this differently. Every morning, a small conversation with himself. Every evening, a quiet review. Not to judge himself harshly, but to understand where he drifted, and why, and what he'd do differently tomorrow.
He had a word for this kind of work. He called it practice, not mastery, not achievement. Practice, something you come back to, something you improve at, slowly, imperfectly, across a whole life. And that reframe matters more than it might seem. Because if virtue is a practice, then you're not behind. You're not failing when you fall short. You're in the middle of something, still going, still choosing, still here. Now pull back for a moment and look at what all of this actually builds toward. Because what Marcus was doing in that journal, night after night, was not trying to be stoic in the popular sense, emotionless, detached, unaffected. He was doing something smaller and harder than that. He was trying to stay connected to himself, in a position of enormous power and pressure, surrounded by people who wanted things from him, in the middle of wars and politics and loss. He was just trying to remain the person he wanted to be. And the way he did that was through these small, repeated choices. The choice to return to what was his. The choice not to absorb what wasn't. The choice to be present instead of anticipatory. The choice to ground himself in character when everything else was unstable. None of these are dramatic. None of them make the noise disappear. But together, practiced consistently across a life, they build something. A kind of interior stability that the world can pull at but can't pull apart. Think about how you felt on the days when you were most yourself, when you made a decision you were proud of, even when it was hard, when you stayed patient when you had every reason not to be, when you let something go that was never yours to hold. Those moments don't feel like success in the conventional sense, but they feel like something. They feel solid. That's the thing Marcus was building toward, that feeling. Not as an occasional experience, but as a foundation. So here's the question this whole thing was circling from the beginning. Why do some people stay calm and clear no matter what happens around them, while others keep getting pulled apart despite every effort to hold it together? It's not personality, it's not luck, it's not that their lives are easier. The answer is this. Calm is not something you find in the right circumstances. It's something you build through repeated, small choices, most of them invisible, most of them unglamorous, most of them made alone. The person who seems unshakable isn't unshakable by nature. They've just practiced the return. They've drawn the line between what's theirs and what isn't more times than anyone saw. They've let things go that looked important but weren't. And over time, the practice became posture. The posture became character. The character became the way they move through the world. So if you're taking anything practical from this, it's probably not a system or a technique. It's two things. The first is the line. Start noticing today how often your emotional energy is spent on things outside your control. Not to judge yourself for it. Marcus didn't judge himself harshly, just observed. Just notice the pattern. Where did your mood get taken by something that wasn't yours? Where did you spend mental energy on an outcome you couldn't influence? That awareness, over time, creates natural separation. You don't have to force it. The noticing does the work. The second thing is simpler. Every morning, even just for a minute, ask yourself, what matters today? Not what's on your list, not what you're worried about. What actually matters? What would you need to be to show up the way you want to, for your work, for the people you care about, for yourself? And whatever the answer is, just sit with it. Let it orient you before the noise starts. That's it. That's the whole practice. Not perfect days, not perfect outcomes, just a small act of intention before the world starts asking things of you. It's almost embarrassingly simple, but Marcus wrote it to himself for decades. A man running an empire, and he kept coming back to the same small reminders. That probably means something.
You woke up this morning and something was already pulling at you. Something outside of you. Someone's words, some situation, some version of the future you were dreading or chasing. That hasn't changed. It won't change. The world will keep being exactly what it is. Loud, unpredictable, often unjust, sometimes beautiful. But somewhere in the middle of all of that, there's a small piece of ground that belongs to you, just you. No one can take it unless you give it up. Your response, your judgment, the quiet decision made again and again across a whole life about who you're going to be in this moment. Marcus Aurelius was emperor of Rome. He was fighting wars, managing a collapsing empire, grieving children he'd buried. And every night, he came back to the same question. Not how do I control more, not how do I succeed, just how do I stay myself today? That's the whole book, and it turns out it's the whole work.